This conference will now be recorded.
Good to go?
Yes.
I thought he was going to close the door.
I'm putting a sign on the door, so.
I hope you like editing.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here today. Number one, appreciate all you being here. My presentation today is called P cubed. I went through several iterations on the name. I had PPP, 3 Ps, but P cubed I decided was the most catchy name. And it stands for Public Personality Prediction. As you can probably see here, what your public profile says about you. And I just wanted to start with this quote by the person who created the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. The understanding of type can make your perceptions clearer, your judgments sounder, your life closer to your heart's desire. So what they mean by type in that first or the second line there is the predicted indicator type from the MBTI indicator index. So this is just a brief overview of what the MBTI is, and it was created by Isabel Myers-Briggs, hence the name's Myers-Briggs, but it's based on the theories of Carl Jung, the famous psychologist. I think most everybody is aware of him. But as you see here, there's 16 unique personality types added all together that are in this indicator. Here's a quick overview of, well, what some of them are. I'll let you guys go ahead and read that there. But essentially, there's, in my view, 4 binary choices, one between introverts and extroverts. But I think it's important to, on the outset, say these are not absolute values. Everybody is a bit of an extrovert and everybody is a bit of an introvert. So, for example, for me, I'm 60% introvert and 40% extrovert. And that can change based on your surroundings. And so what we're measuring here today with my project is the public comments that people make, which are going to have different outcomes than if you were, say, in a private situation. So again, the personality indicators are not a hard set, and everybody is a combination of the two is the key takeaway here. So a lot of businesses around the world actually use this index to not only put teams together, but predict what type of people are going to work well together, and also what type of people will not work well together. We can use this tool created by, of course, Isabel Myers-Briggs to make teams for multiple different companies. And the idea behind my project is to be able to scrape information from either someone's LinkedIn profile, somebody's Facebook, somebody's Twitter, and put that into a box and have it spit out a personality indicator so you have a good idea of what type of personality that person has. So let's get into the weeds. All my data was from Kaggle for my control data set, from Personality Cafe. It's a forum that has everybody that is in this forum has already taken the Myers-Briggs personality test, so it's clearly displayed. And then it takes 50 of that person's unique comments, and those are the 2 features that I have to work with. It was roughly 9,000 rows of data to go through, and none of them are duplicates. So I thought with each of those 50 unique comments, what I didn't specify here is that those comments range from 300 characters, 500 characters. So one of the big, most important factors for predicting this personality type accurately is having enough of the data to actually predict it. So if you just put in 1 or 2 sentences, that's not enough. You're going to need multiple paragraphs, ideally something like a blog post, or you can accumulate multiple comments over a period of time. More weeds here, guys. Look at that. So I took some of my inspiration from various kernels on Kaggle. They had probably 29 different kernels that I looked into to see what other people had done with the data as an inspiration for what I can do with the data. And so one of the things I kept seeing over and over is a lot of people were trying to predict all 4 of these metrics, either I or E, J or P, T and F, so on. They were trying to predict them all as one variable for prediction. So what I decided to do after seeing how poor these came out is I decided to isolate each of these 4 binary indicators, that being the IE, SN, TF, and make a model for each of those indicators based on that feedback. So I also realized after examining these data sets that this data is heavily skewed towards particular types of personalities. For example, the null accuracy for predicting an introvert or an extrovert, introvert was, I believe it was 78% was the null accuracy on that. So heavily skewed towards introverts. And this shows a breakdown of, on the left-hand side, my population data, the biggest being INFP, at 21%, 1,830 comments, or rather unique people came in as INFP. While if you look at on the right, the personality type distribution for INFP is nowhere close to the top for the general population. So this data set is skewed towards particular types that are not common in the general population. So as I already mentioned, I didn't have, after viewing the Kaggle data sets, I didn't have confidence in that 2.48% prediction for predicting all 4 of these indicators or 16 different personality types all at once. So I've got my 4 different types set up, and I think from here we can move on to see in action. This is inside a Jupyter notebook. Here's some of my code. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically I've loaded all my models into a separate API, and I'm calling it back here in order to get a predictor here. And so my example predictor that I'm going to use is for Michael Jordan. So I basically just Googled what Michael Jordan's personality type is and some of his most famous comments. And so this text box here, I can just paste in the comment, and if I press enter, I will get the indicator coming back down here, and it predicts INTP. Now, is that right? Well, I don't know. Let's look at my notes. Looks like he's ISTP. So INTP, that's one indicator off. And this goes back to, depending on what comments you take and what context they're in, you're going to get a different result, because people are not always going to 100% be an I or 100% be an E. But I think that given that I've identified 75% accurately on this random quote, this series of random quotes, I think that's pretty good. But let's go and check out the results that I ended up getting in Power BI. So I ended up with a net accuracy when I aggregated all these comments together of 87% for my control group. So what's cool about this is these 2 tables here on the right-hand side can actually show how many of my ground truth were there, which for ENFJ, it's 190, and I predicted 188 of ENFJ. But what's also pretty cool is I can click on ENFJ here, and it's going to filter my results and say that of these 190 ENFJs, I predicted 157 of them correctly. out of the total of 190. And so it's also interesting to note that I predicted 14 INFJ. So that's one letter off, right? So that if I were to incorporate 75% accuracy, my accuracy would jump dramatically. And I just thought it was a cool feature that Power BI has where you can drill down on information like this. So we can also take a larger data set and do exactly the same thing. INFP 1832, we get a similar skew here. So thought that was pretty neat.
So
But
Gary, if you were to do this better in terms of accuracy, do you need more data?
in terms of accuracy, I'm not sure if I need more data or if I need more varied data. I think to improve the accuracy score, I really, I just did basic logistic regression for my modeling. I used logistic regression, and then I experimented with ADA boost and what was it? ADA boost and I think I have it here, naive Bayes.
Okay.
And logistic regression was generally the best, followed by ADA boost. But what I didn't have a lot of time to do and what I would like to focus on going into the future in my areas to grow section, try additional models, try different models that with this vectorized data and be able to see if I can get the features down or up, as most of the time in my experimentation so far, the features that I added were like ellipses per comment, exclamations per comment, and these just ended up being noise when I tried to add them into my model. They didn't give me any useful information, so I had to pare all that down. But so that's another thing I would like to try, is to add in some of those features and derive more features out of the original post data. The other thing that I don't have here is a UI for the end user to use this interface, and that it's something that I plan on doing. But of course, I have to continue to grow that skill set to give something that's useful to use. But at this stage, the whole back end is completely set up. As far as if I did produce a new model, I could have it ready to deploy with an API in minutes. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought what was interesting when you mentioned that your data set was heavily skewed towards the introverts, and I visited a forum called Hacker News. It's where a lot of IT people come in and talk about technology, and there was a forum post mentioning what is your Myers-Briggs indicator, and predominantly they were all introverts. And perhaps maybe the medium that you had used, the forum data, is already presupposing intuitive or introverted people.
I think there's something to that. I'd like to bear that out in the numbers, but I think we all know people who are generally coders probably have an inclination towards being an introvert.
And going back to your results for Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
What is the difference between S and N?
Oh, yeah, sure. S is sensing, using your senses and kind of more of an outside world. We can go back here just to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. Sensors are realistic people who like to focus on facts and details, whereas intuitives more kind of fall in line with this introverted. They see the big, well, let me rephrase. The intuitives prefer to focus on the big picture. But the sensors generally, it's from what I've read on, it's less of a logical explanation, more of a feeling. But again, that kind of falls into this third category of personality type, the thinkers and feelers. Yes.
So when you were measuring the accuracy of your algorithm and your model,
Mm-hmm.
if you were one letter off or if you were 2 or 3 letters off,
Yeah.
was it considered to be still just wrong, absolutely wrong? Or,
Yes.
Okay, so it didn't.
100%. If it was one letter off, it was 100% wrong.
Okay.
What I would like to do in the future is to see how many of them, and it wouldn't be that difficult, just take a little bit of a time investment to see how many I was 25% right, how many I was 50%, how many I was 75% right. That was originally my goal, but I didn't quite get there today, and that's an iteration I'd like to have in the future.
Yeah, that's why I probably thought we were going with that.
Yeah.
But you probably already have the back end set up to do that sort of methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Any other questions?
What was your biggest learning moment?
My biggest learning moment. I'd have to say it was to try not to think of your problem in just one big, massive problem, to chunk it down and then iterate on what you have to make it bigger and bigger to really approach addressing the original problem. And then also, as far as the coding in particular is concerned, don't be afraid to try something simple because it might save you hours of research on the back end.
Sure. Do you have a roadmap as in what you want to do next?
As far as this project, I would like to, I'm going to end up posting this on my GitHub, LinkedIn, and I'm going to be doing a diary of kind of where I was and pretty much a day-by-day diary of the updates I made to it. I won't be updating it that frequently going forward, but I will be doing is iterating this and improving it. And again, trying some of those other types of modeling and incorporating that, and of course, incorporating a user interface.
Do you have your GitHub location?
No, I'll put it in the comments.
Okay.
Now that you've accomplished this far, if you were going to extend this, where and how easily would it be for you to maybe access inputs from other avenues, other sources, I should say?
Other sources to do another control group or
Another control group, and even to test other people other than blog posts. You know, how would you go about maybe finding other sources to use?
yeah, the difficulty is that the official Myers-Briggs indicators is you have to pay. I think it's around $50 for a test. So there's a little bit of a paywall there, and then finding another aggregation site that has everybody's Myers-Briggs indicators pre-rendered is going to be pretty difficult. But there are a lot of free tools out there that are going to be less accurate, so that of course the how good the data actually is could actually have a severe impact on how good your modeling is. So I'm not sure where I would be getting additional data unless I can find another place that has a similar setup as the personality cafe that I referenced earlier.
The other way is we're thinking about how a credit score is gathered from all publicly available information about a person.
A credit score?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I didn't mention is that you can probably infer some things like that from somebody's personality indicator, you know, just as one of your features. But it's there. The data is there.
Okay.
Would there be a self-reflective lens someone can look through to say, I know my personality profile, I know my Myers-Briggs profile, but how am I representing myself via this public forum?
Yeah, that's the latter half of it is, yes, this is only public information. So anything that you've posted publicly, this has no bearing on privately. So for example, Sharon shared with me one of her friends' kids has a blog, and she shared one of the blog posts with me, and she happened to know some of the personality indicators for her friend daughter, and it ended up in her blog post she's an extrovert, but really she's, if you were to meet her in person, she's more of an introvert.
So did it come out accurately, the prediction?
The prediction came out as labeling her as an extrovert,
Okay.
and that was the key difference.
Okay. Got it. Any other questions for him? Good job. Thank you.